Everything from clothing to household items are getting more expensive each day. The world of fast fashion has complicated clothing production by shipping cheap parts around the world to whoever can sew them the cheapest. And now you, the consumer, are paying the price with rising costs. American Giant is about keeping things simple and close to home. They aren't affected by tariffs because their products never leave the U.S. Skip the tariff and snag yourself American-made clothing with American Giant. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code STAPLE20 at American-Giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code STAPLE20 at American-Giant.com.
All right, joining me now is our buddy, Colonel Rob Maness. Are you guys ready for some good news? Something that is completely driving the Marxist, globalist, godless crazy. And that is Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, I think, is doing a pretty good job over there at the Pentagon. And apparently, he's doing something that hasn't been done ever or in a very, very long time. I don't know. I've not studied the history of it. But I do have I think a video here. Let's see. Someone claiming that this is a first. I think it's a news outlet I've read somewhere claiming it's a first that Hegseth is going to be leading regular prayer services and that this is a first. I want to get to that and play for you actually his prayer. But first, let's go and welcome Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Brandon. It's good to be back.
So he's making history, is he?
Oh, absolutely. He's making history. You know, the prayer service is just a small piece. The bigger one is the directing a further review of the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle. And quite frankly, the people he's chosen to lead it are what's driving the globalist people nuts. He picked
who's he chosen?
He picked Sean Parnell, who's the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, but was a combat officer, platoon leader in Afghanistan. Wrote a book about it called The Outlaw Platoon. And the other gentleman he picked to lead it is former Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller, who, as you may recall, is the only officer to be held accountable for the Afghanistan debacle because he dared to put out a video asking for the generals and the admirals to be held accountable. And
you do know that we brought him.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And we brought him into our studio. We paid him an honorarium. We wanted to bring him in. We wanted to encourage him. We wanted to help him out a little bit. I don't know if you know this, but he came into our studio and did a full evening with us. We were the first groups to reach out to him.
That's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. He's a good man, very courageous. Anyway, he and Mr. Parnell are leading the effort, and that hasn't been done to the generals and admirals ever, I don't believe.
Wow. In fact, I want to do this. Let's just play a little clip. Here is where Stu is in our studio talking about this before the election of Donald Trump, when none of us even knew Donald Trump was going to get reelected. And now he's heading up the review committee on handling how this debacle in Afghanistan was handled, which, by the way, I have a nephew who was a sniper who was doing Overwatch, from what I was told. In fact, he told me the story, and they barely got out. They were on one of the last planes to go out. So, this even touched our family indirectly. But for some families, of course, their loved one never came home alive, right?
That's right.
But here's Stu talking about this in our studio, not too long ago. Watch.
In the Afghanistan withdrawal, if you watch the general's congressional testimony, the guy that was in charge was Frank McKenzie. So he is the CENTCOM combatant commander. So he reports directly to the Secretary of Defense, and then the Secretary of Defense reports to the President. Most people don't understand that. They think General Milley or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs are somewhere in there. If you were to look at a line and block, it's like a dotted line off to the side, so General Milley can advise and get in there. But ultimately, it's Frank McKenzie who's the guy that's in charge. And when you listen to his congressional testimony, he said, well, I told the Secretary of Defense and the President that we needed 2,500 troops. Why 2,500 troops was relevant, why he was saying that, is because if he had that 2,500 troops, he could have held Bagram Air Base. And Bagram Air Base was obviously the critical piece of terrain that we needed to conduct this evacuation. And the President wanted everybody out by September 11th, or he wanted it significantly tapered off prior to that so he could have everyone out by September 11th, rejected that and said, no, I want less people, this is the timeline I want. So problem number one, as the 4-star, like what you asked what the failures are, right there is a perfect example. You're a 4-star general officer, and you're the Secretary of Defense or the President, and I'm here. I need to convince you, hey, sir, you want out of Afghanistan? All right, I'm the military expert. This is what I do. This is what I've done for 40 years. I'm not picking 2,500 people randomly. This base is important. I need to hold on to this base so that I can achieve the objectives that you want. Frank McKenzie failed to do that. He failed to convince his bosses why that was important.
Did he even argue for it?
I don't know. I don't know.
But at least he didn't convince them.
He didn't convince them, which is what's the most important thing. So there's the breakdown number one at the operational level. Number two, so now you're Frank McKenzie, and they say you can't have the troops that you want. So he has to go back. And by the way, I know the operational planners that built the plans for Frank McKenzie, and they told me, Stu, we had multiple plans to keep Bagram, but it required these force numbers, right? So now it's like, all right, guys, here's the restraints on our plan. So he comes back, and they think, well, we can't hold Bagram. What we can do is we can hold Kabul airfield. And they still made bad assumptions about the speed with which the Taliban could advance. So as Frank McKenzie now is analyzing this new problem, if he thinks that it's not executable and that it's going to put people at risk and he's going to lose lives unnecessarily, then he has a moral obligation to resign. Because he can't go into the plan knowing that it's going to fail if it's going to get people killed. He doesn't do that. Failure number two at the operational level of war, right? You failed to convince the boss, and then you analyzed the new restraints on the plan, and you still said, we're going to do this. So then he goes through execution. The Taliban speedily moves through. They blow right through Bagram. There's gear, weapons, people, the whole story hasn't even come out. I believe that we had American weapons still in Bagram that they got, that they probably attacked us with. There's reports that potentially the people that conducted the attack were released from Bagram. All these, I don't know, but the bottom line is we can say definitively we should have held on to Bagram. And then we can say...
And by the way, for the lay people, Bagram Airfield is how far away from the one in Kabul airport?
I want to say it's probably 50 miles at most. I mean, it's not far. It's right there, but it's on the outskirts.
And we that night that happened, we had General Flynn. I had General Flynn on the air live, and he said the same thing. We should have held that air base, Bagram.
It's a no-brainer. I've been to Bagram. I mean, the civilian person who's never been there can't even wrap their brain around how big, how strategic. I mean, you could have done that whole evacuation and had perfect security. I mean, this was a city. I mean, and it had multiple perimeter walls. Holding that would have solved all your problems.
So doing the evacuation out of Bagram instead of Kabul would have been...
Those shots with the Afghanis holding onto the plane, that would have never happened in Bagram. Would have never happened. But again...
Where they were literally hanging onto the side of the plane.
Literally. Some of them held on up to 30,000 feet and then fell off. So, all right. So now the plan falls apart. We watch it happen. I mean, he ends up relying on the Taliban for security.
Who? The Biden regime?
Frank McKenzie. I mean, at this point, it's a tactical level problem.
He's relying on the Taliban for his security.
Yes.
We heard that come out. We heard them in their press conferences talking about the fact that they were talking to the Taliban about roads opening and roads being closed. And even the lay people in America had to be going, you got to be kidding. We're going to rely on a terrorist organization to provide security for our troops?
100%.
All right, Stuart Scheller, right here in our studio. And now, Colonel, great news. He's going to be overseeing, along with others, this debacle and what happened. That's good news. All right, let's go to this prayer. Have you guys heard about this? Got a call over the weekend from a friend of mine who, Captain Udell Myers, Captain Udell Myers was in Vietnam, lost a lot of men under his command. He's been a guest on our show several times. He just called and said, hey, Brandon, I do hope you're aware of what Pete Hegseth is up to. He's really under attack for a lot of reasons. We just heard of one, but there's many reasons. Don't forget, he's tattooed on his arm, Kafir. He's really telling the Islamists what he thinks of them. Fine, you want to call me a Kafir? Here you go, Kafir. But he's now going to hold regular prayer meetings. Listen to this. We'll have Colonel Rob Maness comment on it. Watch this.
Well, Colonel, thank you very much. Let me say something briefly as I look out at this audience. This is precisely where I need to be. And I think exactly where we need to be as a nation at this moment, in prayer, on bended knee, recognizing the providence of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That there are so many things we do in this building and across this nation with such great consequence, it's almost unfathomable. When I think about the task that I've even undertaken thus far this morning and what I'll partake in the remainder of the day, to think it relies only on my strength would leave me completely incapable of addressing the issues of the day or those going forward. And knowing that there's an author in heaven overseeing all of this, who's underwritten all of it for us on the cross, gives me the strength to proceed and to look out at this audience and know there are so many others online here at the Defense Department who share that understanding of appealing to heaven for that guidance, for that wisdom, for that courage. Gives me strength. So thank you for joining us today. This is something we plan to do on a monthly basis, on a voluntary basis here in the auditorium. Hope you'll let those you work with know about it. We're grateful that you would join us here briefly. It's just a brief moment. But pausing and creating that routine of prayer, of humility, of seeking his grace and his guidance, just like George Washington did, on bended knee, in the most difficult moments, with his troops, in impossible circumstances, saying, Lord God, I cannot do it alone. So thank you for joining us here. And we look forward to doing it each month. If you would bow your head in prayer for me. King Jesus, we come humbly before you, seeking your face, seeking your grace, in humble obedience to your law and to your word. We come as sinners saved only by that grace, seeking your providence in our lives and in our nation. Lord God, we ask for the wisdom to see what is right, and in each and every day and each and every circumstance, the courage to do what is right, in obedience to your will. It is in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that we pray. And all God's people said, amen. Thank you.
Wow. It doesn't get much more evangelical and Christian biblical than that, does it, Colonel?
No, it doesn't. He's driving them crazy. But, he used all the right. He did it right. It's voluntary. We're going to do it once a month. I'm going to participate. Put it in historical context around George Washington and some others. And he's well within his rights to do that. And there shouldn't be any complaining. Nobody's being made to do anything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, let's switch over to Russia, to Ukraine. What kind of a tough weekend. Apparently, drones were going after the helicopter of Vladimir Putin. It seems as though, I don't know what you think, President Trump apparently had to be briefed by the media that this happened. He didn't seem to know. He's talking about Putin seems to have gone crazy, and people were like, they were targeting his helicopter, supposedly. So again, I don't know what's going on. I'd like to see people keeping President Trump more in the loop, but that was out there this weekend. And things seem to be escalating with the NATO leaders, these European leaders who just seem so dead set on going to war, and now lifting all of their restrictions as far as how far these missiles can be shot into Russia. Again, the Europeans, I know we have an economist by the last name of Armstrong, we've quoted several times. He's saying, look, these European nations are going belly up. They're going financially bankrupt. They're in big trouble financially. And maybe they need a world war to cover it, to distract, or also, the Keynesian economics of when there's an economic downturn, the government becomes the primary spender, we'll go to war. What do you make of all this? Because it seems as though they want war, and it seems as though things heated up over the weekend. But I really don't want to hear President Trump finding out about it from the press.
Well, that right there, that issue is a big indicator that we still have problems in our intelligence community, the intelligence world and the command and control world under the control of not just the Department of Defense, but the intelligence agencies are not going to be friends of Donald J. Trump. They don't agree with him that we should extricate ourselves from wars and that we should seek peace instead of war. They just don't agree with him. And he's got to get people appointed and in office that will take that in hand and pull the reins back on this and start working with Russ Bode over at the Office of Management and Budget to get those folks out of there, get them rescheduled as scheduled up and removed because they're in policy positions. And everything affects policy when you're at that level, and holding information from the President of the United States, whether intentionally or not, whether it's incompetence or intent, has got to be addressed. It has to be.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the full clip. I'm going to play it. I hope it is. Here it is, though.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
President, what do you want to do about that?
I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. What am I going to tell you? You're the fake news, aren't you? You're totally fake. All right, any other questions? I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it. I'm not happy.
All right, that's not the full clip. I'll see if I can find it. But we played it on a Worldview Report tonight, and when the press told him that, he said, "Oh, I wasn't aware of that." So that really set me back on my heels. Like, wait a minute, you think President Trump chewed someone out over him going out there and not knowing this in advance?
Oh my goodness, I hope so. They set him up, whether intentionally or not. It's a setup, especially when you have the information, even if it's what we would call soft and an initial type information. At least give the man the information and arm him with that so that he's aware of it. Whether first reports from the battlefield are almost always false. So, but he could still talk about it from an educated and knowledgeable perspective. He might have said things a little bit differently about being upset with President Putin had he known that his own helicopter had been targeted by the Ukrainians. Look, in war is random and chaotic and archaic, and an archaic and terrible way to do business, but it is what it is. That's where they're at. And Mr. Putin has the upper hand. He has all the cards. We don't really have the cards. Vladimir Putin's got the cards. Now, if the president takes further action and puts real sanctions on Putin's energy business, then we'll have a card. But you know what? The Europeans that you were talking about earlier have spent more money on Russian natural gas than on helping Ukraine or their own national defense. So don't tell me that they want, that they insist on going to war when they're paying for the war by paying Vladimir Putin. They are the largest purchasers of Russian liquefied natural gas still today. So that's where we're at in this war. Vladimir Putin's got all the cards. And if he gets attacked personally, what do we expect him not to respond in a way? And let's talk about targeting in cities and those kind of things. Look, all of these weapons are GPS targeted, and the Russians have their own satellite intelligence and their own human intelligence networks. And And look, do you really put it past the Ukrainians to not put military targets in schools, hospitals, shopping malls, etc.? They've done it before. Even the Russians have done that. So you got to be aware that the initial information is usually incorrect or flawed in some way. And I will put $20 down if I were a betting man, and I'm not. I don't usually gamble. I watch other people throw their money away and smile and laugh. But I would bet $20 that there's some reason why those targets have been selected. And it has nothing to do with bombing cities. It has everything to do with military targets or what they think is a military target. Look, these systems are not infallible. Our systems aren't infallible. Look, my show today was all about Hegseth's review of the Afghanistan debacle. One of the things we talked about with my expert today was us killing a man and his family who were working for a non-government organization that was helping us, and then lied about it and said he was the perpetrator of the Abbey Gate bombing. So our systems are not infallible, and certainly neither are theirs, because theirs aren't as good as ours.
In fact, I found the clip of President Trump. Here you go.
From Ukraine. So do you have any?
I haven't heard that, but maybe that would be a reason. I don't know, but I have not heard that.
Wow, there you go. I have not heard that. Yeah, I hope he really chewed somebody out over that, and it opened his eyes a little bit to why he needs to bring in some more people into the White House to brief him that are really outside the system. I don't know, Colonel, are you available to take that job to brief him every morning?
If the odd chance that were to happen and he called me, I would have no reason to say no. I mean, the president calls, you're going to help him. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. He needs a guy like you, but we also don't want to lose you, so we can't have that happening. But I guess we would sacrifice for the sake of the country. Okay, so what do you make? These European leaders, they really seem to want to lift the level of how far the missiles can go. Emmanuel Macron's getting pushed in the face by his former teacher. I think that's what his quote wife or whatever she is. I mean, this guy looked like a real fool this weekend. Did you see that, by the way? Did you see that footage?
I did see a short clip of it. I'm sure it was out of context, though, so it was only like 5 seconds long. But the European countries that are lifting the restrictions and those kind of things, honestly, it's the United States weaponry primarily, and some UK weaponry that is the really long-range stuff. But they still have to have targeting information. And the targeting information from us, I think, is fairly restricted at this point with the new administration. There would have to be a good reason. That's another thing. Don't put it past people to set up false decision concepts like firing missiles and drones at their own cities. That's happened before. And the Ukrainians even tried to blame an errant surface-to-air missile that they shot that landed in Poland and killed I think it was a poor farmer guy on the Russians, and try to get the U.S. to enter the war. Remember early on in this conflict? So
yep.
We just have to. Yep. We have to be very deliberate and kind of plodding along, because we are not engaged in the combat, so we don't have to be in a big hurry when we're talking about this information, and more importantly, when the president's being asked to make decisions over it. His team, I'm sure the loyal people on his team are doing the best that they can, but honestly, there's not enough of them, and the deep state resistance bureaucrats, there's still a lot of them in there.
Mm-hmm. Here's the video footage, Colonel. Emmanuel Macron getting pushed in the face by his wife. Anything there? There was nothing to see. Sorry, hang on. Let's see it again. This is actually pretty funny.
Oh, boy.
Man. So So these are the guys that are running the world, running NATO, trying to get us more into war, put boots on the ground, put soldiers on the front line, send missiles in there. This guy can't even apparently run his own marriage.
Yeah, and remember, his populist, the leading populist opposition, is facing prison time because of that. And the Germans are doing the same thing with AfD, trying to put their political opposition in prison. And the UK, the Brits, just denied a woman relief in their court system that because of something she said on the internet that made people angry and upset people. I mean, that's the kind of people we're dealing with. And quite honestly, I don't think we should necessarily be in a defensive alliance with these people in these countries anymore. They don't follow what Americans believe in and what our values are. They're not even close to it. I don't know how this got out of control like this, Brandon, but it is out of control. They're going full authoritarian and totalitarian and think that they cannot be held accountable. And they're gaming their election system so they can't be held accountable. That's not the kind of countries that we should be allied with, especially with a triggering defense like Article 5 of the NATO treaty. That is just not where we should be at this point.
Look at this headline. UK, Jewish protesters charged for mocking Hezbollah. He just put out a little cartoon with a placard of Nasrallah, beep, 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 you know, the grim beepers. And the UK wants to arrest him and charge him because, look at this. They asked him if he believed the image would offend clearly pro-Hezbollah, anti-Israel activists. I mean, these are the people that want us to go to war. Sick.
He should say, yes, I did believe it would offend them, and my intent was to have speech that offends people. That's what free speech is all about.
And speaking of free speech, I noticed you were on something. You retweeted this. You retweeted this about this little boy. Before I play it, tell me what we're about to watch.
I tweet a lot.
He's the one
which one you're talking about.
Okay, this is the little boy that was, I guess the Supreme Court refused to hear his case because he wore a shirt that said there are only two genders.
Yes. Yeah. There it is. Free speech that offends is the speech that America once defended with people's lives, with our blood and treasure. And now we have a Supreme Court denying to hear the case of a young American who simply wore a T-shirt acknowledging the truth. There are only two genders. Unbelievable.
Watch this, folks.
In the 7th and 10th grade at Nichols Middle School, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I never thought that the shirt I wore to school on March 21st would lead me to speak with you today. On that Tuesday morning, I was taken out of gym class to sit down with two adults for what turned out to be a very uncomfortable talk. I was told that people were complaining about the words on my shirt, that my shirt was making some students feel unsafe. Yes, words on a shirt made people feel unsafe. They told me that I wasn't in trouble, but it sure felt like I was. I was told that I would need to remove my shirt before I could return to class. When I nicely told them that I didn't want to do that, they called my father. Thankfully, my dad supported my decisions and came to pick me up. What did my shirt say? 5 simple words. There are only two genders. Nothing harmful, nothing threatening, just a statement I believe to be a fact. I have been told that my shirt was targeting a protected class. Who is this protected class? Are their feelings more important than my rights? I don't complain when I see pride flags and diversity posters hung throughout the school. Do you know why? Because others have a right to their beliefs just as I do. Not one person, staff, or student told me that they were bothered by what I was wearing. Actually, just the opposite. Several kids told me that they supported my actions and that they wanted one too. I was told that the shirt was a disruption to learning. No one got up and stormed out of class. No one burst into tears. I'm sure I would have noticed if they had. I experienced disruptions to my learning every day. Kids acting out in class are a disruption, yet nothing is done. Why do the rules apply to one yet not another? I feel like these adults were telling me that it wasn't okay for me to have an opposing view. Their arguments were weak, in my opinion. I didn't go to school that day to hurt feelings or cause trouble. I have learned a lot from this experience. I learned that a lot of other students share my view. I learned that adults don't always do the right thing or make the right decisions. I know that I have a right to wear a shirt with those 5 words. Even at 12 years old, I have my own political opinions, and I have a right to express those opinions. Even at school, this right is called the First Amendment to the Constitution. My hope in being here tonight is to bring the school committee's attention to this issue. I hope that you will speak up for the rest of us so we can express ourselves without being pulled out of class. Next time, it may not only be me. There might be more students that decide to speak out. Thank you for your time and good night.
Thank you for your time and good night.
What a great American.
Well said, Colonel.
What a great American. Well, so well said. It's too bad that we can't have him run for Congress. He's too young, according to the Constitution, because he's a lot more intelligent and able to put a credible, logical argument together for a debate than a lot of these Congress people that you see hanging out these days.
So well said. Colonel, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of America's founding, and I won't detail here what we're going to do yet because we're still in the planning stages, but I'm going to tell you here and the audience and you for the first time, we are planning a huge blowout Worldview Tube 250th anniversary pageant to celebrate our country's 250th anniversary. What do you think of that?
That's great news. Every American should be celebrating it. But also, we should be looking forward to make sure that we protect that precious anniversary, because it's not about marking a date, Brandon. It's about marking the invention of a nation for the first time in the history of mankind that is capable of and designed to protect liberty, explicitly charged with it, protecting liberty, not just of landowners or royalty, but of every citizen, where it is charged with becoming a country that treats every single citizen equal under the law. And we're not perfect, even to this day, but that is what we are celebrating, and we need to be continuing to look to the future to raise American citizens like that young man you just showed there that understands what it means to defend things like speech, especially the speech that makes people angry.
Yeah, well said. As I've said so many times, Ronald Reagan in his farewell address called for Americans to promote an informed patriotism. And when former KGB officer Yuri Bezmenov was asked by G. Edward Griffin in about 83, 84, in that historic interview, talking about all the things they were going to do and were doing to bring down America, demoralize, destabilize, chaos, then you implement the new norm of socialism. At the end of the review, G. Edward Griffin asked him, well, what do we do? What do we do? He said, teach patriotism. So we're going to follow Yuri Bezmenov's recommendations and that of Ronald Reagan. And while we do it here all the time and regularly and each and every day and every night, we are going to have and are making plans. We're talking about full orchestra. I've been in communications with the executive directors of some very large orchestras. But we're planning to do a big pageant that is narrated, tells the story of America, our history, the sacrifice, what has made America great, the principles, the ideas, what makes us not a democracy, but a constitutional republic, celebrating it in a big pageant. Right now, the plan is in June of 2026. So we'll look forward to telling you more about it, Colonel, as well as the audience. But I think that we got to take advantage of this opportunity because there's a lot of people that don't know a lot about America. They don't really have the information to be involved in informed patriotism. And like this young man expressing the truth, that's part of being patriotic, is speaking up and speaking out the truth even when it offends, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. That is the essence of why we exist. It's how we came about. Right there, when you think about people like Thomas Paine and the writing that he did, and those kind of folks that have come through American history, all the way up to today, there are people that believe in those values that aren't afraid to profess them and aren't afraid to say things like what you just said. Look, I'm not a big fan of indoctrination, but as we have gone away from teaching American history properly and what the nation's all about, why it was founded, how it was founded, all the history, both the positive and the negative associated with us throughout the last 250 years, we've gone away from that, teaching that in a balanced way, and adopted Marxism. This is pure Marxist strategy to divide people by race, to divide people by gender, to force loyal Americans to bend the knee, so to speak, and be forced to verbalize and say that a falsehood is a truth by insisting that men can be women and that you call them that, or that men can play in women's sports and that you force women to accept that. That is all Marxism. Let's call it what it is. It's not socialism. It's Marxism, Brandon. And that indoctrination is what has been allowed. I just read a report from right here in southern Mississippi where state legislators spoke to a Chambers of Commerce event and said they were worried that DEI was being politicized. Well, DEI needs to be banned in our public systems, whether it's schools or government agencies. It should be banned completely because it's Marxist. That is why it needs to be banned. Politics hasn't got a darn thing to do with it. The existence of the future of this country for our grandchildren is what it has to do with it.
100%. And I see that National Public Radio, I guess Reuters is saying that, and others are reporting, here you go, NPR sues Trump, says funding cut violates the First Amendment. Are these guys that stupid? Are they that dumb? We don't get government money. We're not government funded. In fact, I told my attorney 2 weeks ago, I said, I want you to, because they're always telling me it's hard to sue the government. It's hard. I said, I want you to start looking at what the IRS has been doing to our organization, our nonprofit, and several other things they've been up to over the years. I said, it's time for us to sue the IRS and make it a public case. And he keeps telling me why it's so hard. I said, I don't want to hear how hard it is. I want to hear that you've done it. But it's also time for us to look at, again, I'm not an attorney, but it's time for us to find a way to sue the federal government for actually funding National Public Radio. To actually sue the federal government and demand that they stop giving my tax dollars away, your tax dollars away, this organization's, these viewers' tax dollars to groups like NPR, to condoms for Gaza, all this other garbage. This should be considered fraud. It should be theft, taking from one what is rightfully theirs to give to another what is not. This should be called mismanagement, embezzlement. I don't care what they can come up with. I am sick and tired of the fact that it's so hard for us, the people, to sue the federal government. But NPR should be sued. I think the federal government and IRS should be sued. Anybody that we could sue should be sued for giving 1 red cent to any of these organizations. None of them deserve federal money. If they cannot stand on the weight of the free market that people want to support it like they do us, then they should close down. Agree or disagree?
Totally agree, Brandon. And I would also add that, a lot of these court cases revolve around standing, a technicality that is the starting gate or the ending gate, the ending wall of a lot of cases. And who better to have standing than a tax-paying citizen like myself or yourself, who to have standing to say, no, I want to sue NPR because they're using my tax dollars to do things that are working against my livelihood and working against the existence of this country as a free and prosperous country for my grandchildren. Who better to have standing than that? I should be able to sue every single person that's making those decisions in those agencies, the agency itself, and the federal government itself. And I can't because the lawyers say that I don't have standing, and that needs to change.
Well, at some point, and I'm not calling for it now, but at some point, the American people need to say, then guess what? If I don't have standing, if I have no legal right, then I'm not paying for this corrupt system anymore. I'm out. I'm out. Because right now, half the country is working to give entitlements and funding to the other half that doesn't want to work. Not to mention all the terrorists we're funding overseas in these groups. But at some point, I mean, if we had a Boston Tea Party, at some point, the American people have got to collectively stand up and say, if there's no accountability, if there is no punishment for crimes, for theft, for embezzlement, or whatever you want to call it, racketeering, enriching themselves, then we're done. We're out. Because that means that we're all working every day to fund a criminal operation. And I don't know how much longer we're going to be, but at some point, if you've got a Boston Tea Party compare what they were doing, a Boston Tea Party over, compared to what this government's done to us. And yet the American people have been lulled into silence. I think this is just normal.
I think they're not only lulled, but they're chilled by the strength of the government that we voted for ourselves over the last 100+ years. And that's the problem, is where is that threshold where enough people in this country are going to say enough?
Yep. And, that's one way, peacefully, non-violently. One of the best ways to be involved in civil disobedience is by just simply saying, collectively, Americans are done paying for corruption. We're not paying for criminal behavior. We're not supporting criminal behavior. We're not funding criminal behavior. We're not funding the destruction of our own liberties and freedoms and attack on our parental authority. We're not funding it anymore. I mean, after all, Alan Greenspan said the federal government could just print money. Well, if you need to print it, why do you need to tax us to fund your criminality, Colonel?
Exactly. If they can print it, they don't need my money to make their things happen. It's a way of controlling their population.
That's right. It's for intimidation purposes. I do notice today that I guess the governor of Florida has signed a legislation making gold and silver legal tender in Florida. I think more and more states are getting ready for the dollar to collapse and for an alternative system as maybe a backup to a backup. I don't know. Closing comment?
That's good news. It's beyond time for that to be done. And the United States needs to take a hard look at shoring up its currency with something of value because the fiat currency system is slowly eroding and falling apart before your eyes. And at some point, and it won't be far from now, if this massive debt of $37 trillion or more continues to build and we can't get to the point where we can't even pay the interest on it, where that collapse will happen, and then everything will reset back to zero and we'll all be poor.
Yep, 100%. Colonel Rob Maness, robmaness.com, robmaness.com. You also can find him on X. And in fact, what is your handle on X, Colonel?
I'll show at Rob Maness.
Find it. What is it?
At Rob Maness.
That's it?
That's it.
That's your X. That's pretty easy. All right, at Rob Maness. Or robmaness.com. And he's on every day right here on World YouTube at 2 p.m. Central, 3 Eastern. Colonel, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. God bless you.
You too, my friend. Colonel Rob Maness checking in. Melissa brought it to me. Here we go. This is my Gatatana. As you know, I drink it each and every day. Let me take you there. You can go to MelissaHouseGPA.com, MelissaHouseGPA.com. One scoop is the equivalent of 90 billion plant cells. Let me have a little of this here. I am now feeding my cells at the deepest level, boosting my immune system, getting all kinds of essential amino acids, trace minerals, keeping my immune system boosted to try to fight anything that, like, the dreaded C word, which isn't that what this guy took, Tom Harper, that was terminal, gave him a few months to live and started eating the paste, which was the Gatatana he was raising for the shellfish. Went on to live another 10 years, retired to Hawaii. They took 11 biopsies. They all came back negative. Benign. The doctors are like, what are you doing? And thus, David Hunter started Global Plankton Alliance, which is melissahousegpa.com if you want to get a subscription, which I highly recommend you get a subscription so you do not run out, so it shows up every month. I'd like to drink it with a spoon because I don't want to waste any of it. I want to make sure none of it settles to the bottom. There you go. There you go. And of course, you know I do my Bella Grace. You know I do my Bella Grace. This is a 1-2 punch. My immune system's like, woo. So after you go to melissahousegpa.com, then you can run over to melissahousebg.com. That's your Bella Grace. 80 clinical trials. 80. Let me finish this up. Hang on. There you go. All right. So I've had my Bella Grace. I've had my Gatatana. The only thing I'm lacking is my Numi, but that takes 3 minutes. So I don't think you want to see me swish for 3 minutes my Numi, but go back to Bella Grace. The skincare, Melissa loves the skincare. You can read about that at melissahousebg.com. The Bella Trim, all natural, plant-based weight management, restorative sleep gummies, all of it is there. melissahousebg.com. Let's go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors. While we're on it, let's talk about Gatatana real quick. I'm sorry, Numi, which is the glutathione. Glutathione, swishforlife.com. Glutathione, 165,000 studies at PubMed on this. All natural curling molecule. Swish with it within 90 seconds. It's in your bloodstream. Better than an IV, which gets broken down in an IV, by the way. Some studies show that glutathione may actually remove mercury from your brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. So again, highly recommend this. Swishforlife.com. So you go to swishforlife.com to find out more, or you can just go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors, and you'll find the Swish for Life, you'll find the Gatatana, you'll find the Bella Grace. And of course, I recommend you drinking good water. And you'll find the worldviewwater.net. Saw one of the orders come in for that today, for the filter. All of it's there for you. And this is not only supporting your health, I believe clearly from the clinical trials and from what I know personally, but you're also supporting this network because these companies pay us a percentage of each sale. They don't just throw money at us, okay? Only when you order, use the product. And we only recommend products that we personally use, we personally endorse, because we personally use them and we benefit from them. And we know a lot of you are because so many of you have subscriptions to Bella Grace, to Numi, to Gatatana. And if they weren't working, you wouldn't keep the subscriptions. Now, I will say this. Many of you have seen amazing responses from the Bella Grace. The hair growth, your skin, your joint pain, the testimonies are overwhelming. Many of you tell us the Gatatana does well for you, takes away your appetite, curbs your appetite, takes away the desire for the munchies, a lot of positive things. Now, the one thing that you maybe don't see a lot of response from that you know of is the glutathione, the Swish for Life, the Numi. But I would think of that as a maintenance thing, okay? Don't discount it because you don't see or feel the immediate or within maybe 30 days, the response you get from taking the Gatatana or taking the Bella Grace. Remember, glutathione, the third of the three things I do every day, that is a maintenance thing, okay? If the studies show that it may remove mercury from my brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's, then that's what I want to do, right? Because it's a maintenance thing. If I know that the studies show that glutathione detoxes my cells, that's what I want to do as a maintenance thing, right? So what I'm trying to say is Numi is not as popular with our audience as the Gatatana and the Bella Grace. Numi does very well, but the Gatatana and the Bella Grace do really well. Numi trails behind those two, and I think it's because it's not something you see or feel an immediate response to. So when you get off of it, you're like, Whereas when you get off the Bella Grace or the Galatana, your problems return. Well, here's what I would simply say. Think about the new me as your maintenance, okay? Doing the unseen things that need to be done, like removing mercury from your brain, detoxing your cells, so that these other products can work. Because I think these three work really, really well together. So please go right here, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Check out all these great sponsors. worldviewtube.com/sponsors, worldviewtube.com/sponsors.